Here's the thing about Ingemar Engkvist. He's not the guy you'd picture when you imagine a nuclear leader. He's not a titan of industry shouting orders from a control room. He's the guy who left meetings at 4:30 p.m. to pick up his kids, who turned cultural gaps into bridges, and who believes the future of energy depends not on reactors, but how we listen. What does that tell us? Maybe that the nuclear renaissance we keep hearing about isn't about technology. It's about the Ingemars, the leaders who know that splitting atoms matters less than connecting people.
Yeah, I was really curious about what your thoughts were now that you have some time to yourself. And I'm sure you look at things, it's amazing how much is going on in our industry. I've been in it for 40 years. I know you've been in just as long amount of time. What are your thoughts on the future of nuclear power right now?
Well, for me, it's high on my agenda. You should be aware of, I'm on the board of Vattenfall, the state-owned energy companies.
Ah,
And as you might have read in the papers, that the present government is pushing strongly for new nuclear. And of course, would like to use the state company as a vehicle for that. So there is great pressure on us in the board and the management to satisfy, I would say, a little bit naive view of new nuclear.
and what do you mean by naive?
It sounds simple, but we know the supply chains are not as they used to be. You could say conventional large-scale reactors hasn't really been a success lately. Looking at the project in Finland, Flammaville, the only two good projects for, and later Framatome, is actually the two in China,
Yeah.
1 and 2. But those were also delayed and significantly more expensive than originally calculated.
Yeah.
Even China gave up the idea of building new EPRs, and they are now constructing their own design. It is a little bit headwind, I would say, from that point of view.
Yeah. Do you think what's driving it? Because it's amazing when you look at it, especially in the States, it's almost like the Wild West, I would say.
A Klondike nowadays of new nuclear. I think we will come to a time where we sober up a bit, and realize that this is complicated, and we have, over the years, complicated this industry
Yeah.
to almost impossible, or I would say requirements impossible to fulfill.
Let's go back a little bit in your career. I'm curious. You have your doctorate in nuclear chemistry, is it?
Nuclear chemistry, focused on nuclear waste management. So I'm part of a project designing the final repository for spent fuel. That was a long process, so I was just a limited part of it, you could say.
Yeah.
And actually started beginning of 1980. We are now putting the spade in the ground for constructing it.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is, definitely. And of course, Finland, with its mentality, started later, were adopting the Swedish design and are ahead of us now.
Wow. Yeah. So where did you grow up? Were you a city guy or country person?
No, I was I was born in this industry. My father worked for ASEA, which later became ABB, and he was actually commercially responsible for many projects in the US for high voltage direct current lines.
Yeah.
And also been in Egypt for the Aswan Dam, and Brazil, many of the big projects. So although I tried to have a different career, but ended up in this career anyway.
Now, what was that? Because it's funny, my son watched me go to work, and my ex asked him, what kind of career do you want? And I'm not doing engineering. My dad's always stressed, he said, or something. But now he's an engineer.
Okay.
Similar.
My basic training when I left the university, well, I didn't leave the university, but when I finalized my exam is teaching. teaching chemistry, physics, and mathematics. But then I was so engaged in the university, so I continued to take a PhD in nuclear chemistry because I was just captured by this fantastic subject of nuclear chemistry, and it was so much fun doing it, and became engaged. So I stayed 10 years at the university after.
Yeah, and the reason I got to know you is through Wano.
Yeah.
You were the chief executive officer there, and one of the things you talked about teaching, but one of the things that I picked up on is how much you care about people, the people side of the business. How did you go from the technical realm into people?
To be very honest, I've never been a technical expert on anything, particularly not nuclear. So my main interest has been already from young years is people. So that's why I enjoyed I worked as a teacher before I got my exam for 2 years, and I was really satisfied with working with youngsters, although sometimes very challenging. But then I got the opportunity for my first leadership training at the university, where they focused on the people side. And from that, I moved to this business and became head of core and fuel activities. That was my first job at the nuclear power plant. And that was interesting because I was leading a group of very sophisticated academics, which was really where I came from. That was my background, also being an academic. That was a good fit, but it was also challenging as they were critical to everything. And every corporate message was analyzed by the letter to find weaknesses, to find errors, to find stupidities. So you've probably been working also with a corporate office, and sometimes you wonder, where are these guys? Are they on the moon?
Yeah.
And then,
I always thought about they could ask many more questions than any wise man could answer.
I can tell you a funny story about corporate, and that was when I was chief of staff over a nuclear power plant. And I got a question from the generation director in Stockholm asking, how many hours does this plant spend on questions from corporate? Could you investigate? And I said, yes, I can. It's not an easy question to answer, but I will do my best. And I don't remember where it is, several man years. And I ended that investigation with, how much time did it take me to answer that question?
Did he get the joke, or did he understand?
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you could get questions. How many left shoes of size, whatever it is, are used in the power plant?
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting in my own career. I look back and there were certain questions. I have to answer this, and I want to be respectful, but it's going to take a lot more time than they realize just asking a question.
Yeah. They don't realize that when asking a question to a power plant of some generic question, it involves some 1,200 people.
Yeah.
And they are sitting with a group of 5 trying to be clever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in our industry, it takes a mix of, especially when you're at the plant, you have to be practical. And the people that I met that were successful in the industry made it through some kind of gauntlet where it's not just the theoretical, but matching that with the reality of what we're dealing with, designs or whatever the constraint is. And
going back to your question, why I have been focused on people is, as I said, I've never been an expert. I was put in charge of core and fuel activities. I had no clue what they were doing because there was so sophisticated mathematics behind neutron migration and whatever it was. And then I was chief of staff was all about people. And then I was appointed technical director with all these disciplines of INC and so on, I'm just a simple chemist. So it wasn't much chemistry in any way. of my jobs. Apart from I actually designed or created a fuel failure policy, which was interesting because I was related to my expertise. So that was okay. But then I was a plant manager, and then I became CEO and so on. So it's always based on the expertise of the specific area.
But it sounds like you had to pick up some skills on how to take a very technical communication and make it real for everybody. Is that one of your superpowers, would you say?
First of all, I don't have any superpowers. What I learned was that you have to be able to, first of all, identify the people you should listen to. Who are everybody's trustworthy, but which of this group of experts am I dependent on? And be able to ask also critical questions, or stupid questions, you could say, because that's really what it is about.
Yeah.
And I used to take the approach, please explain to me. I just assume I don't know anything about this. Explain to me what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And of course I knew a bit, but that was the approach I took, and that helped me a lot.
Yeah. I used to call it the Columbo method. I don't know if you're familiar, but there was an old TV show here in the States about
and Peter Falk. Yeah.
But he just asked good questions.
Yeah.
And that was really, because like you said, I was an electrical engineer, did controls work, but being able to ask people good questions became something that was so important, because if you couldn't communicate why something was important to the overall good, then you were run over by really smart people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it helped me a lot in also making the critical safety decisions, as that was responsibility. And I think also having broad general knowledge with past experience and being able to listen to individuals helped a lot. Well, saved me. I could handle it.
Yeah, I'm curious about, you talked about being CEO and plant manager. When you took on those jobs, what gave you the confidence that you could do them, given the scope and the strategy and everything that was involved in those new positions?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Probably being overconfident. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also curious. And every time I changed jobs, which I did frequently, was really a boost of my development. I took the opportunity to develop when I had a new job and a new position. And I was curious and I was interested. First of all, I never applied for a job. I was always asked if I wanted it. So that's probably also a little bit, you could say, based on the score, how I have scored in the past. The people trusted me that I could do a good job. And the responsibility for an appointment was never mine. Now, the person that appointed me had the responsibility for the success. But of course, you had to sometimes question, am I the right person for this? And it kept me sleepless at times.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to put this without putting myself in a very positive view, but I've had quite strong work ethics. And I used to say to people when I had staff meetings and so on, everyone should look in the mirror in the morning to say, I did my best yesterday. And if you're not able to do that, you should question your performance.
Yeah.
So that's been a big part of my development, reflecting on decisions I've made, things I've said, things that happened, could I have done differently? And I think that will help anyone. And I have a daughter-in-law. She's also a manager and in completed business. And I'm trying to encourage her to reflect because sometimes she complains. So and they come with the same questions every time. I say, think about what you answer in those questions. If
Yeah.
there's another way for them to find the answer and maybe get it confirmed by you, instead of just presenting alternatives. Should I do A, B, or C? They should think themselves, what is the best alternative? And maybe discuss with you, this is what my way forward. Is that okay? Do you think it's the
Yeah.
right thing to do? Because otherwise you limit other people's possibilities to develop.
Yeah, and I think that's hard for people, especially. It feels like you have to have information right now, and you get sometimes out on limbs when just reflecting and engaging other people, which is not I don't know, it wasn't as common when I started in the industry as it is today. Talk a little bit about, you talked about your daughter-in-law. Talk a little bit about the people that we need in this industry going forward. Because like with my son, I mentioned him, he's still, even though he works at a paper mill, he finds time to hang out with his friends on the weekend. And his work-life balance seems a little bit better than you talked about your work ethic. How do you think those two, the newer generation and the way we were brought up with that really heavy work ethic, how do you think that's going to play out in the industry in the future?
I think it's a little bit culturally related. I'm a Swede, and I've done my best to create a work balance by taking a responsibility for my kids, which meant I usually never worked on weekends unless something extraordinary happened. But Friday evening until Monday morning, I was here for my family. It was not easy, and the part that suffered from this was myself, because I was torn between what was needed at work and what was needed with the family. What contributed to this is we got triplets. And of course,
Oh, wow.
being triplets puts a little bit of extra stress on you and different expectations that you have to share. But nowadays, especially here in Sweden, in their relationship, both parties work full-time, even with kids, which means you need it creates a different need on work-life balance. So I think what is key for the future is flexibility, which we have today. My son-in-law, he works from home. He is also a manager. He works from home once or twice a week, depending, sometimes not at all, but depends on the possibilities that he has to do some administration. He does that from home. They have a 3-year-old son, which takes a bit of time, and he wants to also be an active father. I think flexibility, I think nowadays young employees expect a quicker development than it was for us. It was in the beginning of the nuclear history. I had a CEO I worked for. He became head of maintenance at the age of 27. When I was active, you couldn't get to that position at the age of 27. You would be 40 or 50.
Yeah.
But it's changing again. And I think the expectations is a quicker development, a personal development. Also, young people change jobs more frequently. Say, okay, I will find something new to do. And maybe I'll go take a year off and go surfing or whatever it is. So it is different now. But I can tell you, I was involved in maintenance, and we were really worried about that the older generation maintenance staff were going into retirement. And how are we able to fill those gaps and the loss of experience? It didn't become a real problem because the young people are so quick of picking up the important things, probably much quicker than we were when we started. So that experience gap wasn't as great as we feared it would be. So I think it is, we just have to realize that things are different now. We need to attract the right people, the right talents. We need to offer flexibility. We need to offer a good work-life balance. And we need to encourage females, because just from statistics, 50% of all the talents born in the world are girls. But somehow the structures we have is that these are deselected or not encouraged to reach for the more important positions in business, whether it's nuclear or whatever it is. Because if we look at the management compositions of companies, it's getting better, but still majority of them are males.
Yeah.
Means we have a system that somehow deselects talents, and we can't afford it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I think back, you just talked about triplets. I can't imagine your wife's face. And when you had to say, hey, I have to go to work or I have to stay late.
She worked too. We had them in daycare. I left them in the morning before going to work, and she had to travel. So I had to pick them up from daycare as well. 4:30 or so. I have a management team meeting we had. And I said, this was scheduled to end at 4, and we are now at 4:30. I have to leave because I have to pick up my kids. And there was a colleague of mine said, what kind of manager do we recruit nowadays? And the CEO said, be aware, these young kids are our future employees. You better take care of them.
Wow. That was a powerful statement.
It was. None of them were at all interested in physics or mathematics or so. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's true. That happens. So you were CEO of WANO. So talk a little bit about WANO, its mission, and what your role as CEO of that organization was like.
Well, first of all, I started in WANO as the director of Paris Center, which I was for 3.5 years. And that gave me many insights of the situation in the world. Especially Paris was responsible for Argentina, Brazil, most of the European countries, and China, and part of China, CGN of China. So I got to see a lot of power plants and different ways of leading power plants, different performances of power plants and so on. And that created sort of an idea that this is vital for the industry. And then I was asked or proposed to be the CEO of WANO and based in London. But I must say, I think the greatest contribution to WANO was when I was the director of Paris Center, rather than the CEO. Position is a lot about diplomacy, you could say, and not as much on performance of plants or weaknesses of plants or development possibilities. And also, the pandemic started. I started in 2020, exactly when the pandemic. So I had to work from home for more than a year because the office was closed. And then in 2022, the war in Ukraine started with all the things which came as a consequence of that. And keeping WANO together as an organization, which was extremely difficult. I collaborated a lot with the Director General of IE, Rafael Grossi. We had weekly mail correspondence, text messages, all could be in the middle of the night. He was somewhere and it was somewhere where we discussed unofficially what we needed to do to safeguard plants in Ukraine. And I was in contact with our Russian member a lot, our Ukrainian member a lot, not both of them together, of course. but individual conversations, trying to influence them, especially regarding the situation in Zaporizhia, which was alarming to me, and it is still worrying, although now that the units have been offline for quite a while in cold shutdown. So there is much more time to react on the loss of offsite power and so on. The time of 2022, it was really, they were phased out or they were cold shutdown, but still a lot of energy produced. They were dependent on the grid, and it failed frequently. So that was so we tried to work together, I and Moano, on this issue. So I was very much occupied with the Ukrainian situation, as well as the aftermath, you could say, from COVID. So that was my focus at the time, but also developing a new strategy for Wano, trying to make it, you could say, much more clear what the organization wanted to achieve with its members. Because the strategy document today involves more the members than Wano is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that Wano was created after Chernobyl, and similar to what we did after 3 Mile Island here in the States. And and we promote excellence, and Wano promotes excellence. And you started what was it called? Plan for Excellence? Excuse me, I forgot I'll edit this out.
But wait a minute, it's called
Action for
Excellence.
Action for Excellence, yes. And what's interesting, I think, and I'd love your opinion on it, how do you go, so you have standards that apply throughout the world.
Yeah.
And you go to different cultures and countries, and there are limitations. I've been to South Africa, UAE, Tokyo. There are so many different nuances. I'll give you a quick story. We talked about proficiency at one of the leadership seminars I did, and I asked one of the Japanese participants, and I said, what's the current state of your proficiency in operations? And I said, we don't have any. We've been shut down. And it threw me off because I never even considered that. And I said, of course, that's true. But proficiency with operations, they had to start from scratch almost to relearn how to operate the units as they came up. But there were so many challenges that I never considered because of cultural differences. How did you apply those same standards to all these different cultures that you interacted with when you were at Wano?
First of all, the standards was developed together with the members. There is one specific document about leadership where I was part of the group that developed that document. And we had representation basically from all cultures in Wano, which made it a sort of a generic or applicable document in all cultures. We deliberately avoided to get into a specific culture and let that culture set the standards around the globe. We were really keen on a question, is this really applicable in China? Is it applicable in Russia? Is it applicable in Japan? Is it applicable in the US? South Africa, you name it. And so I think it is a document which is applicable regardless which culture it is applied in. But you have to be a little bit careful when you try to interpret what is printed in that document and use it in the context you're in. Because we know there are differences. You can look at just in Europe, or you look in Scandinavia or Nordic countries. The culture between Sweden and Denmark is very different, where the Danes are very direct compared to the Swedes. Swedes are really trying to discuss, trying to find consensus. We are more consensus-oriented than the Japanese, I must say. But still, the standards that are developed is something you should achieve with your culture rather than contrary to your culture. You should use your culture to achieve what is written in the standards.
It's interesting that how did you coach your evaluators to be able to go to a place like Sweden? They're from the United States, which were very direct, and why aren't you getting to the point type discussions? How did you coach them?
I didn't coach them myself, but this is not a new exercise in one. So part of the training for these reviewers is cultural training. As you say, Americans are quite direct, but not as direct as the people coming from the Netherlands, where it's almost brutally direct. But still, sometimes you could probably feel that these people was cut out the crap and get to the point.
Yeah.
Still, it is measuring versus standards rather than discussion around it and how to get to the standards. It's whether there is a gap or not. And I know I've been through mono reviews as a manager, and I know Swedes usually score low on some of the leadership aspects because they are so unfamiliar. And the gap and the weaknesses identified by one are real weaknesses, but it's a consequence of our culture. But we just have to know that this is a weakness. We have to work on this. I can give you an example. Follow-up is particularly a weak sport of the Swedes because we are from a trusting culture. If I tell you to do something, I expect you to do it, and I don't have to follow up that you did it. Well, that's true, but also we need to understand that if you don't follow up, that person will not feel appreciated for the work he or she has done. So follow-up is not only checking that things are done, it's also a positive feedback and an occasion where you can discuss how did it go, that work, and was it okay, and is there something we can improve? So just giving or agree that you have to paint that wall red or whatever it is not enough. You have to go back and discuss with the individual the experience and check that it was done also. So we have to fight our battles in our culture to become a lot better. And that gap has to be addressed. So scoring low on some of the leadership criteria, those were real. So you can't just say it's not part of our culture. It doesn't matter if it's part of our culture or not. It is a gap.
Yeah. When I got to meet you, you kicked off one of the seminars we had during COVID, which was online, and it was for shift managers. And just the fact that you showed up made a huge difference because you know how difficult it was during COVID to try to get people interacting. It just feels different. For a leader like yourself to take the time to show up and kick off one of those seminars, which was a huge benefit because you're demonstrating how important leadership is, how important what they do is. And I think it made my job a lot easier to try.
I'm happy for that.
Yeah. And I look back and we look at, we can't meet in person, but it also gives you opportunities to reach out to people you never could have.
Absolutely. It would be impossible to travel to all these events. So actually teaching us to use online tools helped us a lot.
Yeah.
Like the conversation we're having now.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me to travel to the US and or on the phone chain.
Yeah. And speaking of that, what do you think the future of our industry is with the advent of AI and other technologies? Look at SpaceX, what they've been able to do with just commercial off-the-shelf type equipment that we use in our phones and such. What do you think the future looks like for nuclear power if we can utilize some of these technologies?
I think it is a great possibility and absolutely necessary that we understand what we can use, how we can use it, and the risks involved.
Yeah.
I'm old-fashioned in the sense that I believe still that human beings and humans' decision-making is vital for the safety of plants. I don't think that a intelligence AI can completely replace the EPR. The French EPR is software-based, basically 100%. And that was the original design. When it was implemented in Finland, there was a requirement from the regulator. There should be hardwired backup with back panels. I'm in favor of that. It shows that, yes, we can, most of the things we do today in a control room can be handled automatically without any problem. We must understand that could be situations where the knowledge, experience, and courage of individuals are necessary for the safety.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely in favor. I think it's a great if we could also, which was spoken about many years ago, Internet of Things, if we could monitor our equipment a lot better than we do today, could be vibrations, temperature, or sound, whatever it is, it would be a great benefit for the industry because we need better surveillance of our plants and our equipment. And combine that with AI would give us a huge benefit.
Yeah.
So it's not only operational plants, it's actually, I would say, diagnostics of plants where we could really benefit from that.
Yeah. I've read someplace that the new airplane engines have 10,000 sensors. It's a crazy amount. And we definitely don't have that.
No. So in that sense, we're a very conservative industry. But if we want to make this industry more cost effective, more reliable than it is today, especially reliability, where you can benefit from sensors and automatic diagnostic tools.
Yeah.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Last question. So hopefully we'll have some young leaders, young people in our industry listening to this podcast. What's your message to them to give nuclear power a chance and get involved and become part of this industry that we've been in for a number of years?
I advise all youngsters to join the energy industry, whether it's nuclear or wind or whatever it is. It doesn't matter because this industry offers so many opportunities to individuals to learn more, to also make a career. For me, it has been, without any comparison, the best place to be through my years. So I think, and I've spoken to many younger, not youngsters, but younger who have started a career in the energy business, and it has been fantastic for them, and also how much they can contribute to this industry. So my advice is, if you want to have a good career, interesting jobs, join the energy industry. That's because I cannot find a better place to be.
Yeah. I think you're right. And hopefully, like you said earlier, we'll have some more females and other folks that want to get interested that traditionally weren't part of it.
We speak about gender. It's really about a broad view on diversity.
Yeah.
So it's also cultural background. It is also, whatever aspect of diversity is important that we include everyone in this industry and don't deliberately close the door to people, which we do today, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have to.
We are on a path forward in this, but it's going too slowly, in my view.
It's fascinating if you actually look at the numbers. In a country like Germany that closed down their nuclear plants, have to now buy power. They're buying power from France, which is there's a lot of nuclear power in France. So they're really not away from the industry. It's, as engineers, we look at these things versus the politicians and the decision makers. But the numbers really look challenging in terms of us being able to meet the needs of that are low growth and things that are coming up.
I used to work for E.ON, which is a German company owning also assets in Sweden. And I was on the German-Swedish management team for managing the nuclear assets. And I've been through this tragic story of Germany. And my view is when they decided to end the operation of Isar 2 in south of Germany, which was, in my view, the best operated, the best maintained, the safest reactor we have at that time, at least, in the world. I found no reason for that. You should realize it operated for, I think it is actually 33 years because it was extended a little bit. From the start to the end of operation, not a single scrap.
You're kidding.
No. And commissioning, it went straight up almost to 100% and never deviated from that level. It was just remarkable what a good design. It was one of the most expensive reactors I've ever constructed, but it paid off. And why did we have to shut down such a beautiful plant?
Yeah.
And now, from my point of view, is Germany is in a difficult position with industry suffering from high energy prices, carbon emissions increase. I don't understand the logic in this, but I'm reading the biography of Angela Merkel right now. I will find the answers.
All right. Let me know what you find out.
It's about some 1,000 pages or so.
Oh, wow.
It's a big book.
All right. Again, thank you so much. I was honored to hear your story. I appreciate your time, and I'll let you know when the podcast comes out.
Yeah.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Nuclear Leader. If you want to understand why this industry survives, why it thrives, despite Chernobyl, despite Fukushima, despite every headline, look past the science. Look at the humans. Next time, we'll dig into another story where the rules of leadership get turned upside down. Until then, stay curious and remember, sometimes the answer to a safer world isn't in the textbook, it's in the mirror.